Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, Marianne Williamson's in the building.
Thank
Here you
you.
go. She's running for president on the Democratic ticket. And we have some questions.
Okay.
Yeah. The chat's already going crazy. They're very excited. Before we get started, I'm gonna really quickly do this. Okay. All right. Okay. So, first and foremost, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
This is probably the weirdest interview that you've ever conducted, I suspect, because, you know, how often do you go to a random person's house and then sit in front of their weird background and talk to them? As you can see, everyone that's watching just like respond in real time. Have you ever done one of these before?
Well, first of all, you're not a random weird person. Second of all, most of my adult life has been spent in Los Angeles, so this doesn't look that weird to me.
Okay, good.
The part about everybody on the thing, of course, is what it is.
Yeah. You know, that part is definitely strange. You're in town. You're doing some media right now.
Yes.
I saw you not recently, but you a while back went on the Dave Rubin show to explain to him.
That was here, wasn't it?
Yeah. To explain to him important concepts such as systemic racism and how it exists. So that was pretty good.
Apparently.
Yeah. It's not even new to him. Hello. You can sit in here if you want. Right there. Yeah, we can barely hear her. Okay, I'm going to try to see if I can boost your gain here, but you can just like yell a little bit or get a little bit closer to the microphone.
Okay.
This is the best we got, unfortunately. Anyway, today is probably going to be a little bit different than the normal interview that you get, in the normal interview that you do, but I'm sure it'll be fine. We can talk about like different trends in culture. Especially considering that you have a lot of prominence on TikTok. You're all over TikTok. You're more on TikTok than I am, I would say. How do you feel about that?
I feel seen and heard by young people. I understand it, actually. My message to them has been that they're not even 20th century people, and they shouldn't live their lives at the effect of bad economic ideas left over from the 20th century. So I feel seen and heard by them, but I think that's because they feel seen and heard by me.
Okay, that's cool. Let me see. Let's do this real quick.
They don't have an institutional memory of a time ever in their lives when it felt like government was on their side. And they feel that government policy, understandably they feel this way because it's fact, does more to thwart than to support their own dreams for self-actualization and living the lives they want to live.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Do you, I mean, why, let's just start with, why are you running? Like, what's your goal for running on the Democratic ticket?
Well, somebody has to say certain things. This country needs to start over. We need to end an aberrational chapter of neoliberalism in this country. We need to repudiate the corporate tyranny that now owns our Congress, owns our government, and has its tentacles in every corner of our civilization. To me, that's what the Democratic Party should be saying. And if nobody's going to run for president saying it as a Democrat, I am.
Okay. I mean, that quite literally happened last time around with Joe Brandon. I mean, he and I guess 7 other candidates directly ran in opposition to Medicare for All at a time when this necessity was only being voiced by one candidate, Bernie Sanders. Has your perspective on Medicare for All and its viability changed over the years?
Yeah, I had a kind of amazing grace type of moment because last time I thought, well, you know, Medicare, Medicaid, we can get there. And I did have a moment when I sort of got it. Yeah, we need Medicare for all.
What was that for you? What was that moment of change?
I don't actually remember it. I don't remember when it was. I don't remember if it was during the campaign or after. Forgive me, my phone is ringing.
Don't worry, I just called Joe Biden Joe Brandon. This is not supposed to be a professional interview. Just don't show it to the camera. Make sure that it's
okay.
Yeah.
I'm turning off my phone. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's all good. Don't worry about it. It's just like, this is not supposed to be a professional interview by any means. This is the most professional I've been in a very long time, though.
Why, you're on good behavior?
I'm being on my best behavior, yes. So there was another guy who ran on a campaign of trying to improve turnout for younger voters, and unfortunately, I mean, he's sitting right there on a cutout, but unfortunately, that didn't come to fruition. Do you have any other opinions on how to mobilize younger voters?
Well, I have not made an effort to mobilize young voters. I mean, I'm grateful that they're responding, but I don't have any strategy like that. I'm seeking to tell the truth as I understand it. I want the American people of any age to have the option of a complete repudiation of this aberrational neoliberal chapter of American history. And we need to start over in this country. We need a new beginning. We need an emergency level transition from a dirty economy to a clean economy. We need to move from a war economy to a peace economy, and we need to push back against what is essentially a matrix of corporate tyranny. So to me, whether you're 80 years old or 18 years old, whether it's about the next 20 years of your life or the life of your grandchildren, it's about the state of our democracy and possibly the state of our humanity. Even the habitability of the planet could be at risk here. This is not a time to slow walk. It's not a time for incrementalism. It's not a time for endorsing someone that says the opposite of what I'm just saying because you think somehow the chess game of Washington will help you get there. It's not time for any of that. And if none of them are going to say it, I am. And I think there's a point to that, too. They become locked in by the system. And I think it will take, and Cenk was saying that actually, it will take someone from outside, I think.
Yeah. What kind of mechanism for change do you think is necessary here beyond just the bully pulpit? Because as the president, potentially, you will have a lot of powers. What do you think some of the greatest hurdles will be in undermining or completely rewriting a neoliberal organization of the economy?
Well, first of all, every president, no matter who, is hoping for a House and Senate that is aligned with their thinking. So that will make a huge difference. But even if you don't, you do have the power of executive orders. You have the power of the appointments of heads of agencies. You can certainly get rid of the corporatists who head the agencies in too many cases, even if you can't quite bring in the problem solvers, depending on what they block and don't block. And you have the bully pulpit. And also, we all know that this needs to be an outside-inside strategy. So I think the revitalization of the labor movement, organized labor right now, is one of the biggest things going on. So one of the things they would really know that they had a partner in me, whether it has to do with beefing up the National Labor Relations Board, whether it has to do with the PRO Act. To me, that inside-outside elements would be fortified by our presidency.
So you're interested in beefing up the NLRB and giving more power to workers so they can unionize?
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think about the strikes that are currently going on all around us in Hollywood? I mean, you've spent.
I was on the picket line the other day.
Oh yeah,
It's great.
I saw. Yeah, that was great. What's your opinion on that as far as what's going on with the
course, Well, there are two elements, and one element, of course, is the same with Starbucks. It's the same with Amazon. It's the same with the grad workers at certain schools, et cetera. And that simply has to do with how baked into the cake it is that stockholders and CEOs and their stock dividends and their stock buybacks, this profound and really immoral transfer of wealth into the hands of a very tiny few, under the canard that they would create jobs. Of course, their business model is not job creation. Their business model is job elimination and worker exploitation. So it's very fantastic. The response of the first Gilded Age was the establishment of organized labor, and the response of the second Gilded Age, which we're living in, is its repudiation. I think it's extremely important. Now, in addition to that, when I would do interviews, and before SAG-AFTRA got in, and it was just the writers, they were talking about things like a writer used to be hired to stay for the duration of the development of the script, right? And then they started doing this thing where we only need you for scene 1 and scene 3. So then that writer has to go work somewhere else to see if there's a scene 2 or scene 4 that he can work on, or she. And of course, this is also to the denigration of the product itself. So that's, first of all, just the dignity and the living wage issue and the decency, all of that. We understand all of that. But with the SAG-AFTRA thing, this added element of AI. I mean, it's extraordinary. You could take that they make you sign away in perpetuity your image that they could use in another movie. No, it's terrible. And I think Fran Drescher is doing a bang-up job, and I think she's making it clear. during the last campaign, Andrew Yang had written a book, The War on Normal People. And that was the first book that I read that actually I got it about the threat of AI. And I remember one of the things that he says in that book is, don't kid yourself. You might think you have a job where only you could do it. I mean, even like lawyers, they're talking about that now. Don't bother to go to law school because of all of that. So I think...
But Andrew Yang's solutions were, not necessarily great, in my opinion.
Definitely. That's not what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
I'm just talking about the whole issue of AI. And I think, and fencing it in and realizing what a threat it represents. And not only to the issue of work, this could be bigger than that. So I think with SAG-AFTRA, particularly adding the AI issue, it's important for all of us. And I think that what people are realizing, what I hope people are realizing, people need to realize, is that don't think this doesn't apply to you if you don't work at Amazon, or doesn't apply to you if you're not a writer, or doesn't apply to you if you're not a barista. It applies to all of us whose lives have become, which is the vast majority of us, whose lives are at the effect of this vulture capitalism and what it has become in this country.
Yeah. Speaking of Andrew Yang and unique candidates or outsiders, you yourself are an outsider.
Outside what?
Outside of the DC mouthpiece, corporate lobby
System
influence.
as it is, status quo that has taken us to where we are.
There's another person who claims to be, there's another person who claims to have outsider status, but of course is from like a political lineage family. I'm of course talking about RFK Jr. What are your thoughts on his campaign so far?
There's one place where he and I agree, and it's the only place where I found that we agree. We certainly agree on the issue of agency capture and the marriage of, government and corporate power, and how basically that is a fascistic element. He and I certainly agree on that. On the other hand, I don't understand how that is married to his belief that, as he says, he's a free market capitalism guy. I read the other day that his prescription for how we're going to handle climate change is with the discipline of the free market. So, yeah, Bobby and I have a very different view.
Yeah, he went on Jordan Peterson's broadcast and agreed with him on that and said that, and Jordan Peterson is actually in the pocket of oil lobbyists and has channeled their misinformation in terms of climate change.
Yep.
And for Robert Kennedy to go there and agree with him is pretty egregious, especially when considering that he has a pretty long career of defending environmental rights, a lot longer than, I've been alive even. So very, very strange choice of words there. I don't know where he got that from. But so people are correctly pointing out that he's done a lot of weird things. He gained a lot more prominence in recent years through anti-vaxxer conspiracies, through those circles, QAnon and whatnot. Some of the writing that has been conducted on your campaign so far have also had a little bit of not necessarily claiming that you're an anti-vaxxer, but definitely there is some questions about that. What are your stances on vaccination?
Well, the thing I do agree on is that I don't think pharmaceutical companies, I don't think that insurance companies should be dominating our, whether or not we have health insurance. I don't think pharmaceutical companies should have the dominance they have. I don't think gun manufacturers or big oil or big chemical companies or big food companies or defense contractors should be dominating our policies. I think too often, obviously, the profits of pharmaceutical companies are placed before the actual health and well-being of the American people. In no other advanced democracy do they lack universal health care. So you take the top 5 pharmaceutical companies last year alone, and their profit was $80 billion. Meanwhile, we have people rationing their insulin in this country. We have people who are putting GoFundMe pages on the internet to pay for life-saving operations for themselves and their loved ones. So no, I'm not a big fan. Obviously there's profit and then there's profiteering. And I believe that there's a lot of profiteering going on the part of Big Pharma. And I think there's a healthy skepticism that all of us should have.
But in terms of vaccine science, it feels like, to me at least, and I'm the layman, I'm not very intelligent, it seems like the people that are supposed to be ensuring that every single person is inoculated have the science behind it seems sound to someone like
and
myself.
And there's risk associated with every vaccine, and we know that.
Yeah. So overall, I feel as though it is an objective good. I mean, even Donald Trump with his Operation Warp Speed, this is one of the few
Absolutely.
instances where I feel like this was the government operating in a way that it was supposed to. And there was definitely negative consequences associated with that, but that wasn't necessarily vaccine injuries, but more so not allowing this vaccine IP to reach,
Poor countries.
poorer
Yeah.
countries,
All of
shutting that off. Bill Gates got a lot of criticism, and people said, "Oh, he's trying to chip people," all the way, ranging from conspiracies all the way to like 5G waves, killing people or whatever. But the real thing that people should have been upset about in terms of Bill Gates's personal position on the vaccine was him stopping Oxford from releasing the patents and
That's
forcing the AstraZeneca vaccine to maintain its IP control, maintain
Absolutely.
its patent control,
Yeah.
and the numerous amounts of misinformation that he spread in terms of how India was not capable of creating an adequate vaccine, and therefore it would be devastating and would create more vaccine skepticism when India has and is continuing to supply pretty much 75% of the global South with their vaccinations.
I agree with that.
Do you feel like the profit incentive is what causes vaccine skepticism and other medical misinformation to thrive?
I think that there are two things we have to look at here. First of all, we have to have first of all, there's a certain kind of healthy skepticism, certainly. But at the same time, we have to have a general trust in our agencies, the institutional forces which are pillars within our society. We have gotten to the point now where the skepticism has become cynicism, and it is too much. The system is too saturated because we have to have enough trust in these agencies. Now, whether it's the CIA or the CDC, it's sort of the same thing. It's like, do we trust you people? So we have to look at the fact with the CDC as well as others, to what extent did their behavior play a part in some of the distrust, not the unhealthy conspiratorial stuff, but some of the healthy questioning, like what was going on here. And I do believe that during COVID, there were people who, most of whom probably with the best of intentions, did not trust the American people to have a more honest conversation. And I think that transparency is always a good idea, because let people be smart enough to figure some things out for themselves. So I think there was some ways in which some skepticism was almost stimulated by a lack of transparency. Yeah.
I mean, I think epidemiologists run a tightrope whenever they talk about any kind of prevention with respect to further spreading a virus. And yeah, I mean, there were certainly issues with the original communication and how it spread.
And it was a moment of panic.
There was definitely a lot of people that thought that, I mean, it was mostly fomite spread. I myself included, alongside many others, thought that you were supposed to like wipe off your groceries and whatnot. But ultimately, I think that that again stems from their interest in being as protective as possible over a novel coronavirus that is, was ripping especially the elder population to shreds. Yeah. So I think I give them a lot more
I think
leeway with
as I
that.
said, the vast majority of them over there, I absolutely believe that's true. Absolutely, I agree with that.
Yeah, but I don't necessarily agree that it's more transparency that would stop, naysayers and people that have generated and have a genuine financial interest in spreading COVID misinformation, and then even farm their own alternative products. I don't think that would have stopped.
Can be true. Both can be true.
Okay. So. What else to talk about? So that's
Nothing's going on or anything.
No, there's a well, actually, there is a lot going on in the world, but I do feel as though this has been a relatively less interesting cycle for the election. I think people were way more tuned in, and I say this only as like a media person, I guess, as much as I am not really a media person, but I analyze the way that at least my generation is looking at like elections now, and they do find Joe Biden to be old. They find him not to be a very inspirational figure. A lot of people are complaining about his age and whether he's capable of running again. And the Democratic Party has completely shut off the like any kind of left-wing opposition to that or any kind of person from running against them, even though I'm a firm believer that even if someone is not necessarily has a shot at winning, I think that healthy debate is good and has the capacity to maybe even shift the incumbent on certain positions. Bernie Sanders did that with Obama's second term. I think that was good. Do you feel as though the modern Democratic Party is losing the younger population of voters that feel like Joe Biden is not fulfilling his campaign promises?
Yeah, and I think that even what you just said was repeating their narrative. Even someone who doesn't have a shot at winning, the person who gives a robust progressive agenda right now, offers a robust progressive agenda, is the person who is articulating what the majority of Americans want. The majority of Americans, both Democrats and Republicans, want universal health care. The majority of Americans, both Democrat and Republican, want tuition-free college and tech school, paid family leave, a guaranteed living wage, etc. So they are so institutionally resistant to a robust conversation and allowing a person who is a real progressive to have that. So, every time we repeat that, that's just chopping their wood and carrying their water. So, of course, it's boring because they're saying, well, this can be just in a little corner over here. Of course, she's not serious. Whereas really someone articulating progressive views right now is the only serious candidate. Serious about climate change, serious about the war machine, serious about healthcare, serious about what is going on. That's what's serious. So, yeah, it's boring because the real truth is being suppressed. But when I say the real conversation of what's actually happening in people's lives is being suppressed. But you know what it is? It's a fake boring. It's like when Martin Luther King talked about positive peace and negative peace. He said negative peace is where there's no outright conflict, but there's underlying tension and anxiety. You say it's boring, but that's just because underneath, what's rumbling underneath is people acquiescing, giving up, feeling numb, and this kind of emotional decline. And that's also one of the reasons why I feel young people are ready for something more and aren't buying into, well, she's a long shot or she's just maybe she could move the conversation. This is their lives. And I think that those of us who are progressive need to say that. I don't care. Maybe you don't like me for whatever reason. Whatever. For these narratives that are spun or kooky, wacky, whatever. Which is, I don't think there's anything kooky or wacky about 68,000 people dying every year from lack of health care, 18 million Americans unable to fulfill their prescriptions, 85 million under or uninsured Americans. And no, I have no crystals in my books or in my home or in my lectures. So if people can't see through that disinformation...
I love crystals. I have...
Good.
I don't know where they're at. I wanted to ask you your opinion, but you're not
kooky if you have them in your house.
Well, it's sexism. That's why I do have the OP buff of being a dude, so they don't really. I don't get hit with that. Thank you for saying it,
sir, dude.
Yeah, that's just But crystals are great. Okay, so I didn't realize. I mean, I thought that you were a crystal mommy is what people are calling you in a not bad way, in a good way.
Well, it
wasn't necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, well, but it has been used to minimize. Let's not kid ourselves.
Okay. All right. Well, I didn't realize that you were you had no interest in crystals whatsoever.
Well, I think they're pretty. I mean,
okay.
I certainly think they're pretty.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, look, I'm honest. I had to say it, Chad. I know Chad is like, why did you say that to her? Well, I mean, like
it's good. It's good.
I've succumbed to the media narrative.
I'm a big girl. I can handle it. We can talk.
I've succumbed to the media narrative myself. Okay. So, I mean, there's more I want to talk about. So there's obviously a lot of issues, and you're very good at communicating some of these problems. But I think, and I'm not going to carry water for the DNC, the Democratic establishment, or Joe Biden here, but I think Joe Biden also did a relatively decent job communicating some of these problems when he was running in opposition to Donald Trump. But the Democrats consistently tell me that they're unable to overcome institutional hurdles. You said that you would need you would also need a favorable Congress.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
So some of the hurdles, for example, are the likes of Kyrsten Sinema.
You are chopping wood and carrying water for them.
No, I have my opinion on how to deal with that sort of thing. I'm asking you how you would deal with it.
So,
yeah.
For instance, you said that the president was very good at articulating this before he ran, and even to some extent while he's there. So let's take two examples. One was he said he would raise the minimum wage. Still at $7.25 an hour. We have 1/3 of America's workers who live on less than $15 an hour. Half of them cannot find a place to live. In most major cities, a living wage is $24 to $25 an hour. So the president achieved that for federal workers. Great. And then he wanted to put it in the COVID relief bill. And guess what stopped him? The parliamentarian. Now, let's be very clear here. Republicans do not let something like the parliamentarian stop them if they want something done. When the parliamentarian stood up to George Bush fired the parliamentarian. So President Biden was, can't do it because of the parliamentarian. BS. Secondly, the president says, and he said when he was running, and he said since, that climate change is the existential threat to humanity. Absolutely. And he has put some healthy investments in green energy into the Inflation Reduction Act. The problem is he approved the Willow Project, an $8 billion oil extraction project on the North Slopes of Alaska, which completely nullifies all the benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act in terms of the green energy investments there. Plus, he has given more oil drilling permits even than Trump did, plus the $858 billion defense budget, given that the defense establishment is the single largest institutional emitter of greenhouse gases. So the president is very, it's a playbook, which I'm sorry if this offends anyone. It started with Obama. And it's that the Democrats have perfected saying the right thing, saying what we want to hear. And it was just fine until you notice what they did. And then too many Democrats go, poor baby, he couldn't, and for excuses when it's something which if a Republican had done, we would have screamed bloody murder. And the president, and Kyrsten Sinema did not force the president to approve the Willow Project. And Joe Manchin did not force the president to not fire the parliamentarian, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth.
I agree.
Good.
Your opinion on this is identical to mine.
Good.
I've said
I love people
damn near the same things. I think that as far as the IRA goes, I think that there was certainly a lot more that the Biden administration could have done, and I think that potentially the president has more power to influence legislation than just sitting back and offering a incredible accomplishment to a green senator like Kyrsten Sinema. And I think that as president, you would have powers to be able to
absolutely
persuade naysayers in your inside of your caucuses, inside of your Congress. Do you have any opinions on what you would do different?
Well, all of those things certainly that I just said.
Not just the Senate parliamentarian. I'm talking because there's beyond because here's the thing. Beyond the Senate parliamentarian hurdle that was basically self-placed.
Yeah, that's just on one issue.
Yeah, there are even on that particular issue, the $15 minimum wage. There is always a rotating villain in the Democratic Party. A rotating villain could be Joe Lieberman in the Obama administration. It could be Kyrsten Sinema. But then before we are done with Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, let's say that they are reasonable. There's Bob Menendez. There's Maggie Hassan. There's so many other senators, and even depending on what the House of Representatives looks like, there could even be a caucus like the Problem Solvers Caucus, like
Listen,
the centrists
no
that
matter
could.
who becomes president, he or she is hoping for a House and a Senate who is aligned with their agenda. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, it really makes me squirm the way we make excuses for Democratic presidents. Republicans don't do that. Republicans have more spine with their, they don't care if it's a Republican president. You didn't do it right. So I'm not interested. I think we need to hold our politicians more accountable, particularly as Democrats. So I'm not interested in well, this is why he didn't, and this is why he poor baby couldn't. I
have once again, I have my own opinions on how to deal with that.
Right.
I'm asking you what you think would be the best way to go about it.
In many things, you can do executive orders. In many things, it has to do with who you appoint as head of agencies. Let's give an example. Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin did not force President Biden to nominate as our Secretary of Defense a former board member at Raytheon. He's in there with it. I'm sorry. Okay, so there are many issues like that. The Biden administration could, if they chose, exercise marching rights to lower some drug prices. So there are some ways in which Joe Manchin has stood in the way, or Kyrsten Sinema has stood in the way, and other places where the president has not just chosen to go there. Why? Because he basically is a corporatist Democratic elite establishment, and their playbook is we want to help people as much as we can on the periphery survive an unjust system. However, not so much that we actually challenge our corporate donors who make the return of all that suffering inevitable. Ever since Bill Clinton and the Democratic Leadership Council, the Democratic Party has been trying to have it both ways. And ultimately, you can't. The Democratic Party should stand for more than the amelioration of stress. The Democratic Party should stand for more than I'll help you survive an unjust system. The Democratic Party, and by the way, to win in 2024, is to stand for ending the injustice.
Okay. That's great. One other aspect of the injustice or institutional hurdles would also be the Supreme Court. What are your opinions on how to deal with the current 6-3 supermajority that seems almost permanent at this point because they're all very young as well? How would you deal with the Supreme Court if you became president?
I would have a very honest conversation with the American people. This is where the bully pulpit is helpful. If you look at something like Sheldon Whitehouse's book, this was well strategized corporate takeover of the Supreme Court. The way I look at it now, it's basically a rogue institution. We're supposed to have 3 co-equal branches of government, and they've made themselves into authorities in their mind, not only overriding the will of the people, but overriding the will of the executive, overriding the will of Congress. So, first of all, obviously, I join with those in Congress who are saying there's no reason in the world why there are ethics rules for every other layer of the federal judiciary, but not them. That needs to end. I think we need to have a very serious conversation about term limits because, like you said, they're young. So Amy Coney Barrett, could have another 50 years of influence. And also, I would not be afraid, as Roosevelt was not afraid, to talk about packing the court. The Constitution does not say that it has to be 9. Now, what happened with Roosevelt was once he threatened that, they pulled back a little bit. But as president, I would not be pussyfooting around that issue. Now, I also understand those who say you could pack it, and then when the Republicans were in power, you could have the same problem. But there's just so much we can take. They are in a systematic trajectory of actually diminishing the rights of the American people.
I mean, it doesn't matter. Even if Republicans pack it back, that's not really a threat, considering that they already have packed it.
Yeah,
so it
I
would
agree
still,
with that. Yep,
it would be in the short term at least, if there was a democratic institution capable of administration capable of hacking the Supreme Court.
That's how I see it.
It would be a 4 years of some level of freedom and clawing back civil liberties.
I want to see the Democrats have some spine. And as president, I would have some.
What are your opinions on immigration and how Joe Biden has handled immigration so far?
I think that Joe Biden is doing what he can within a system that is a basically false narrative. To me, the crisis at the border is not, oh, they're all coming in. The crisis at the border, to me, is the humanitarian crisis experienced by these people. One of the things I would wish to do as president is to help this country look in the mirror. And if we do look in the mirror, one of the things we see is the egregious policies, American foreign policies in Latin America over the last few decades, many of which have contributed to the economic destabilization in many of these countries, which has made them vulnerable to all of these horrors. So that's number one. Number two, I think we should end the drug war. It's not going to fix everything, but I think we need to make some fundamental changes like this that would lessen the power of the cartels, which are causing all of this violence. And we need to do what Congress failed to do over the last few decades, which is provide much more opportunity for people, not only at the border, but many of whom have been living here for decades. We force people into the shadows. There are so many undocumented people in this country who do not want to be undocumented. Our immigration policies force it. Let's not forget, even Ronald Reagan gave amnesty to 6 million people. When I was growing up, all you had to do was go, walk down to the registry office. Look what's happening in Florida right now. Look what's happening in Florida right now. A lot of people in Florida are unhappy with Ron DeSantis now. Like, where all our workers go because of so many undocumented people who are fleeing the state. So people who were traumatized by drug cartels under my administration would not be traumatized again at the border. You were talking about differences with Bobby Kennedy. On one hand, he talks about the humanitarian crisis. He talks about it talks about American foreign policy. But then he talks about how under his administration, the border will be impermeable. I'm like, what are you talking about? You talking about cement here? You talking about more wall here? You talking about soldiers? Look what they were doing the other day, pushing children into the Rio Grande. There's state-sponsored crime that goes down there. Separating children from their parents is state-sponsored crime. So I think that America needs to open its heart. Unless you are descended from enslaved people, or you are of an indigenous people, who the hell do you think you are? Who do we think we are? My grandparents came through Ellis Island, escaping oppression in Russia and Poland. And I think it is a sacred responsibility that we have as American citizens to honor what asylum means. To me, it's at the core. And also, just one last thing about that. Even statistically, undocumented workers and immigrants to this country do more to contribute to our economy than they do to take from it. And I'm really offended by all these false narratives that inform so much of that debate.
True. Speaking of enslaved peoples and what to do, you have, like I said, spoken about systemic racism. What are your thoughts on reparations? Well,
I'm the one who, in the last, I think that America has a debt to pay. After World War II, Germany paid $89 billion in reparations to Jewish organizations. By the middle of the 20th century, it was an established principle of kind of international consensus that if one people has done an egregious wrong to another people, that financial remuneration made sense. And I also think if Martin Luther King had not died, we were on the path. We'd had the Voting Rights Act, we'd had the Civil Rights Act, and I think that would have been the next leg of that stool. And I believe that a debt is owed. And I also think that my sense of the American people, and I've talked to people all over the country about this, is not that the average American is a racist, but the average American is deeply undereducated and underinformed. And if the Ron DeSantises of the world have their way, the future generations will be more uninformed to the point of disinformed about the history. If you have been violently enslaving people for almost 250 years, and you add to that another 100 years of institutional oppression in the form of segregation and institutional, you owe people something. How can we even talk about this? And I think that a lot of white people might not realize, if you did, through a program of reparations, if you were to close that wage gap, it would actually make the entire American economy something like $1.5 trillion larger. So on an economic level, it would actually help whites as well as blacks.
Yeah. Okay. Hold on. Let me gather my thoughts real quick. I 100% agree with you on that. I think that's great. Okay, let's talk about some. We agree on a lot of stuff, but let's talk about some stuff that we might not necessarily agree on. So this is the part where it'll get a little bit trickier.
Okay.
Couple things I have to address this. Obviously, there have been a lot of there's been a lot of writing in the media about possibly mistreatment of your campaign workers. Mm-hmm. So this is something that I'm sure you're aware of.
Oh, yeah.
Would you like to address what they've written and why they're writing this?
Why they're writing it. Gee, I can't even imagine. That's number one. Figure it out. Number two, if you are in a court of law, there are the rights of the accused. If you're in a court of law, those who are accusing me, those who are saying she did this, she said that, would have to raise their right hand and under oath swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And when they lob accusations at me, my counsel could cross-examine them, ask them some questions. My lawyer could look at certain evidence. Certain evidence could be shown to the judge and say, this is not legitimate, and the judge could decide whether or not it was even shown to the jury. So I say that it's like the old Simon & Garfunkel song, I would not be convicted by a jury of my peers. Am I a perfect person? No. And in the last campaign, I thought, okay, I would raise my voice. I would say, God damn, fuck, shit. Not at people so much as damn. It happened. But this one and the stories on this campaign,
There has been turnover, as far as I understand.
Yeah, and you know what? Managers. Yeah, okay. So Ron DeSantis, big article about Ron DeSantis. And you know how his letting go of 6 people was contextualized? Man, he's a strong guy, and he's redoing his campaign to make it right. When you look at some of the things that have been done by and said about me by former campaign people in the campaign, given what was true, would you have wanted them working in your campaign? And some people are really wonderful people who it wasn't right for them or wasn't right for us. We don't have $6 million. We don't have $35 million. So we have to be very focused on where the money can be spent.
Okay. Another issue, another thing that we would probably disagree on a little bit is maybe foreign policy, but especially as it pertains to Israel.
Okay.
So Israel is America's greatest ally, according to both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. I want to hear in your own words how you deviate away from the Democratic establishment on that front.
I do deviate from the Democratic establishment quite a bit. First of all, let me say I am Jewish and I am a lover of Israel. But there is at this point the furthest right government that there has ever been in Israel. The settlements are illegal. The occupation is illegal. And the blockade of Gaza is wrong. Now, that $3.8 billion in military aid, there is a memorandum of understanding. So that's there unless there is an act of Congress to pull that back until 2028. However, the president can, and as president...
Thanks, Obama.
Pardon? Yeah, thank you. That, as president, I would absolutely, and could, by the way, the power would be given me, to insist that that money not in any way be used in a way that transgresses human rights as we stand for them or purport to stand for them, and as we should stand for them with any ally.
So what are your boundaries as it pertains to Israel? Like, do you consider Israel to be an apartheid state, or is that a bridge too far? Do you think that criticisms of Israel from the likes of Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar are wrong or inconsistent? Because this is something that the Democratic Party, again, has claimed. They instead of addressing massacres happening in Jenin or anything of that nature, will turn around and seek to punish their own members in their own caucus, people that have familial relationships of the oppressed people.
I think that there are laws. There are certain laws and certain rules in Israel which could legitimately be called apartheid laws. I do believe that it is legitimate that there be a safe haven for Jews. However, a country that is a safe haven for Jews should not be an unsafe place for others. And with the founding, the original ideal of Israel was that it would not be an unsafe place for others. And unfortunately, they're actually moving backwards at this point. And sometimes you tell your friends the truth. What Donald Trump did was he went with the far right on the issue of Israel. What what President Biden is doing, which the corporatist Democrats are doing, is hands off, all of that, fear of AIPAC, all of those things that we understand. And I would be very hands on, and I would be taking a stand for equally robust support on the part of the United States for both the security and the human rights of both peoples.
Okay. You say both people, so that's why I'm trying to still understand. The Palestinian population is, as you said, under conditions that could, by legal standard, be considered apartheid conditions. Are you willing to withhold what we consider aid, but is a defense contract?
Well, as I just said to you, there is a memorandum of understanding. It would take an act of Congress to withhold the money until 2028. What I would do, what the president can do, is insist that that money not be used in anything having to do with settlements, anything having to do with the occupation, anything that in any way transgresses human rights as we in the United States describe them.
What is to do with, what do we also do with the obvious, you already said it's illegal, the occupation is illegal, especially in West Bank. What is to be done with the already existing settler areas in the region?
We've got a problem. You've got a lot.
From the American perspective, too, because we are an incredibly important ally to Israel, obviously, and we do have negotiation power in the process.
What the U.S. president can and should do is make it clear that we believe, it's not even our belief, it is fact, those settlements are transgress against international law. You know, it's interesting because when Obama was at Tel Aviv University, he did give a speech in which it was clear that he understood what was really going on there. What the problem was actually effectuating some of the views that he himself articulated. I know people. I know them in Israel and Palestine, and I know people here who do represent a next generation consciousness about that area. And I would gather them, and I would seek to harness that kind of consciousness here in the United States for an entirely new conversation. And I would make it clear the leadership of Israel would know, and I think the leadership among the Palestinians would know as well, that the United States stands for something which is far more enlightened and fair and just than what is occurring now.
What do you think about our treatment of Cubans and Cuban population, Cuba as a country, and the embargo?
You know, it's so interesting. Batista lost. There was a revolution. Castro won. Get over it. That was a long time ago. And I think that, I lived through decades where the hold of Cubans who were so resentful because Batista, they had power in Batista, it was like, enough already. Now they have younger generations, their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. This embargo of Cuba is cruel. I think that a lot of Americans underestimate the violence of sanctions. The absolute violence and who they actually hurt. So once again, this is an interesting area, isn't it? Obama began to open it up. Then Trump closed it down. And this is one of the areas where we thought that
Biden would
reverse.
Yeah.
So no, open it up, let people travel, let people have economic relationships, live their lives and be happy. And if that's where Cuba is, that's where Cuba is. Cuba gets to determine what's going on in Cuba.
Okay. Speaking of sanctions, obviously there are other countries that are sanctioned as well, including Iran, North Korea, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, and also Russia. How do you, what are your opinions on the ongoing invasion of Ukraine and what America's role is in the conflict, and what some solutions President Williamson would have that is different than what Biden has done thus far. Do you agree with Biden on his handling of the invasion of Ukraine by Russian forces? Of course, I'm going to ask you about China as well in a second, but I want to hear about your thoughts on Russia first.
Well, first of all, because it's literally the news today, a place where I deeply disagree with the President Biden is on the use of cluster munitions. Bombs. Those munitions are evil. They are obscene. They are illegal according to 122 nations, and they should be according to ours. So my heart is really broken, and we should not be using cluster bombs. And I think Americans need to realize what they mean, because they have repercussions after a war is over. Children, other innocent civilians killed by them. They don't all detonate at the time that they're dropped, and so forth. I will say this. No, of course, the United States does not have clean hands. Yes, the United States was, pushing too far east with the whole Ukraine NATO thing. Yes, the United States, or no, I should say, we should not have had the Aegis missiles in Poland. However, this is where I differ from a lot of my friends. None of that, to me, justifies Vladimir Putin's invasion of a sovereign country. And to me, if you're an anti-imperialist, you're an anti-imperialist if the U.S. does it. And to me, I'm an anti-imperialist if Putin does it. And obviously, we need a negotiated settlement. Obviously, the only ultimate possibility is a negotiated settlement. Someone like the foreign minister of Denmark has said, let's get together, but it has to be not just Ukraine's allies. It's not a unipolar world anymore. It's a multipolar world. You got to get everybody here. You got to have China. You got to have India, Brazil, and so forth. However, I think some people talk very simplistically about what it means to call a ceasefire. The United States does not have the power to just walk in there and say, hey guys, stop, okay? If you were simply if the West were simply to withhold all aid at this point, military aid, then the peace would not be the result. It would simply be the avenue by which Putin would crush Ukraine. So no, I'm not on with that. I would like to see it be a negotiated settlement in which Ukraine has any Ukraine to negotiate.
Yeah, I think that, I guess I do agree that if the United States would withhold all arms from Ukraine tomorrow, that this would be absolutely devastating for Ukraine. I don't disagree with that. Except due to that reality, I think that they have a lot more power in the negotiations process in terms of issuing a terms of ceasefire than.
But what does that look like? I don't understand quite what that would look like. To whom? We don't have the power to dictate that to Putin. Who are you saying we're dictating those terms to?
That's why you have to have China at the table as well. But
ultimately, Xi went to Russia. We were hoping for that. I was hoping for that. Xi went to Russia. He spoke with Putin. Zelensky said, hey, call me. We were all hoping, listen, I don't care who can come up with an answer to this. And we were hoping, and they actually ended up with these quite weak principles. So,
there was a 15-point plan negotiated in Turkey in the earlier version of the invasion that seemingly was a little bit more prosperous. Zelensky himself even conceded to pushing Crimea later down, to like a 15-year program for Crimea, where he would have another democratic vote on how to best continue on with those negotiations. That all fell apart when Boris Johnson visited Ukraine, and I don't think that England has any sort of agency in this conversation beyond operating as a mouthpiece for the American State Department.
And then there's that interview with Naftali Bennett and so forth. So, I don't think you have to excuse the United States to stand for the sovereignty of Ukraine.
Yeah, I'm just saying that there was a peace negotiation with a 15-point plan.
I don't disagree with that.
That's Russia and Ukraine. You talked about multipolarity. So what is your opinion on the current administration dealing with China, and what would you do differently?
We need to walk back the Cold War talk. We need to completely shift the paradigm of foreign relations. We skirt disaster. We skirt disaster when it comes to the environment. We skirt disaster when it comes to the economy. We skirt disaster when it comes to people's lives and healthcare. We skirt disaster when it comes to war. We absolutely must move from an oppositional, adversarial role with other powers. Once again, like you and I both agreed, it's a multipolar world now. We're not the only superpower. And it's our own fault, by the way. It's our own fault. We squandered our moral authority. We squandered our military respect. And, hey, we left a lot of openings for China to just walk right in there in terms of their...
I don't necessarily feel like it's a bad thing, to be fair.
No, I'm not even... Yeah, I mean, I hear that, too, when I say it's our fault. Like, no, I don't have a problem with what you just said. Okay, but the point is now, we need to find a way to move to a collaborative paradigm. We need it in terms of nuclear war. We need it in terms of climate change. And we need it more and more every day in terms of AI. So we have to stop it with this. I look at American foreign policy over the last 50 years as toxic masculinity writ large. Cowboys going out, guns a-blazing, so immature, so lacking in wisdom. We must learn how to wage peace, and we must learn how to have a far more humble and respectful relationship with other nations.
Okay, so you're in disagreement with the current foreign policy perspectives on China that seemingly is bipartisan, and it's like xenophobia, that China is bad, evil.
Well, there have been some efforts when Yellen was there and Blinken. I mean, I think they're making efforts for economic collaboration, which is necessary.
I mean, that's an ongoing thing, regardless of what American media or the State Department says. It's like inevitable that we are always going to collaborate with them. They're a massively valuable trade partner. It's more so just saber rattling, in my opinion. But you differ on that front, is what you're saying.
Differ
from not me. I'm saying from the current administration. I mean, because I feel like those conversations, as it pertains to trade, are ones that are not necessarily changing attitudes in any meaningful capacity. It's more so a reassurance. It's not dissimilar to America's opinion on China being a one state, a unified state with two separate systems. Whether it, with Taiwan, for example, which is there's always been, since the Nixon era, the American attitude towards China has always been like, yeah, we're not gonna do anything. We are no longer recognizing Taiwan as the real China, and it's just autonomous region, while also simultaneously giving arms to Taiwan and trying to massage any kind of interest that there may be in the public. And oftentimes this is not dissimilar to the Arab Spring. Real legitimate interest in emancipation or wanting to become independent, beefing up these different groups in a collaborative effort to utilize an area with historic conflict, while simultaneously claiming that you're on board with it due to trade relations. I feel like the trade relations stuff is, I got really convoluted there. The trade relations stuff is just the norm. That's always going to happen. But as far as dealing with China as a partner, it seems you are on board with seeing them as an equal.
You've said repeatedly that the economic relationship is ongoing. War with China would certainly interrupt that.
Yeah.
So, in order to protect the ongoing trajectory of economic relationships with China, which is an important collaboration, we need to make sure that we walk back from this crazy cowboy talk, including that about Taiwan.
Okay. All right. Well, we that about does it, because your PR person was telling me. I mean, I think you did a great job. I this was not meant